My name is Dr. Nathan Cole, and I work under the National Applied Research Directorate, Field Division 3. The official classification of my position is Senior Investigator for Environmental and Structural Anomalies, though internally everyone calls us the cleaners, because we are the last ones sent in when something out in the field refuses to be explained by physics, biology, psychology, or any other civilian discipline. My job requires a calm mind, quick legs, a willingness to stand alone in places where no one has any business standing, and above all, the ability to return with a version of the truth that the public can absorb without losing sleep. I have been doing this for 12 years. Today is the first day I'm going to write down what really happened, word for word, because I don't trust the official report that will eventually be forced out of me. The call came in at 4:32 a.m., waking me before my alarm. A landline call which almost never happens. The voice on the other end belonged to Director Hale, and he didn't waste time on greetings. He told me I needed to be at Site 19A before sunrise and to come alone. The rest of my team was being redirected to a different sector. That alone made my stomach tighten. Field Division 3 never splits unless someone upstairs wants fewer witnesses. Hale said a hiker reported a structural collapse in a restricted observation zone that no hikers should have had access to. The hiker was temporarily detained, but not in a state to answer questions. Then he paused, as if measuring the next words. He said the hiker insisted something underground had shifted upward. That phrase stuck with me. People don't describe collapses that way. I reached the site a little after 6 o'clock. Dawn was still behind the treeline, and the day had that cold, unfinished feeling that makes the world seem slightly off axis. Site 19A isn't a building or an installation. It's a patch of forested land in a federal reserve, technically marked as closed for wildlife rehabilitation. In reality, the area has been under quiet monitoring for the better part of 2 decades. Sensors, seismographs, pressure plates, audio triangulators, most buried deep enough that even rangers stepping directly on top wouldn't know. None of the equipment ever captures anything dramatic, but it captures enough irregular movement patterns to justify keeping it on the books. I've been there 3 times over the years, and nothing about it has ever stood out, until this morning. A single ranger truck was parked beside the locked access gate. The ranger, a man in his early 60s with the kind of sun-aged face that suggests long seasons on the job, stood stiffly beside it, hands clasped behind him. His name tag read R. Forrester, a name I vaguely recognized from old email exchanges. He didn't approach me, didn't lift a hand in greeting, just watched me walk up like he was waiting for me to tell him what was wrong with his forest. I identified myself and he nodded once, curt. He said he hadn't entered the site since the report came through. He said he didn't plan to. When I asked why, he told me the hiker who came out of the restricted zone wasn't bleeding or injured, but his lips wouldn't close properly, like his jaw had forgotten its own shape. The hiker kept repeating the same sentence. It pushed the dirt up to meet me. Forrester said the man whispered it the way someone whispers a confession. I asked where the hiker was now, and Forrester only shrugged in a way that told me he didn't want to know the actual answer. I unlocked the gate and started in on foot. Everything about the morning was normal at first. Pine needles, damp soil, a faint scent of something metallic drifting on the breeze. The forest floor absorbed my footsteps so well it made me hyper-aware of my breathing. As I moved deeper, a mild tremor hummed through the ground. Not enough to throw me off balance, but enough to make the dirt shiver. It wasn't seismic activity. I know that sensation intimately. This was something more like pressure release, like air exhaling through soil. I followed the coordinates Hale sent, trekking past the usual sensor nodes half buried in brush until I reached the observation clearing. But the clearing wasn't a clearing anymore. Trees had tilted inward as if a circular section of earth had risen beneath their roots. Not by much, maybe 2 or 3 feet, but enough to distort the landscape into an unnatural bulge. No collapse marks, no sinkhole behavior, no visible shift of surrounding soil. It was a mound formed upward, clean and almost symmetrical, as if shaped from below with deliberate force. I pulled out my field tablet and checked the sensor history. The pressure plates under the soil had all spiked at exactly 5:07 for a period of 20 seconds, then flatlined completely. The seismographs recorded nothing at all. No tremors, no motion. Something moved, but none of the machines registered movement in the way movement is supposed to read. I circled the mound, walking slowly, taking photos, dictating notes into my recorder. Halfway around, I noticed a depression in the dirt near the summit of the mound. A footprint, human, bare, toes pressed deep, heel barely touching, like the person had stepped upward out of the ground rather than downward onto it. The print was fresh, edges sharp, soil still damp where the weight had pressed moisture upward. My pulse kicked into overdrive. I knelt, examining the print without touching it. No signs of dragging or stumbling. Whoever made it stepped out cleanly, and the size small. Maybe a teenager, maybe smaller. I stood up too fast, scanning the trees. Everything was quiet, the kind of quiet where even birds don't dare make noise. I called out, announcing myself, identifying my agency out of pure protocol. My voice sounded wrong in the still air, like it wasn't carrying as far as it should. Then I saw the second footprint, and the third, a trail of them, descending the other side of the mound and disappearing into the trees. Each step was pointed forward, no sign of hesitation or panic. A calm walk away from a place where no one should have come from. I followed the prints, slowly, careful not to disturb the pattern. The forest thickened, branches lowering, the metallic scent sharpening like the air before a lightning strike. My mind ran through possibilities. Illegal squatters, lost children, delusional hikers. But none explained the uplifted terrain, the machines failing, or footprints rising from within earth that had no visible break. The footprints led me 30 yards before stopping completely in the middle of open forest floor, vanishing as abruptly as if the person had been lifted off the ground mid-step. I crouched, heart pounding against my ribs hard enough to make my shirt pulse. Soil undisturbed. No branches snapped. No evidence of departure in any direction. Just gone. Right as I stood up again, the ground beneath my right boot rose half an inch, pushing against me. Slowly, deliberately, like a held breath starting to exhale. And the forest, for the first time in my career, felt like it was aware of me. The feeling of the soil lifting my right boot was so slight I might have dismissed it as settling earth. But the movement didn't settle. Pressed upward, firm enough that I had to adjust my balance. I lifted my foot instinctively, stepping back, and the patch of ground stayed raised in a perfect, convex swell. No cracking, no loosening dirt. Just a soft, deliberate bulge, as if something beneath had nudged upward, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't speak out loud. Some instincts you don't question, and this one told me that acknowledging the movement verbally would be a mistake. Instead, I slowly crouched and held my hand above the soil, close but without touching. A faint warmth radiated upward. Not hot, but out of place for early morning forest floor, like body heat seeping through dirt. I checked the thermal reader on my field tablet, and it showed nothing but ambient temperature. That bothered me more than if it had registered a spike. Thermal anomalies I could explain, log, categorize. Thermal dead zones around heated soil? That screamed misdirection, interference, manipulation. Something beneath me wasn't just moving. It was hiding. The bulge flattened smoothly, as if exhaling again, and the forest seemed to release a long, low tension from its branches. The metallic scent returned in a rush, sharp like rusted water lines after being disturbed. I stood, forcing slow breaths, focusing on protocol even as my pulse thudded fast enough to make my fingers tremble. I stepped back the way I came, following my own boot prints to the mound. Everything looked unchanged, the raised circle of earth, the single bare footprint facing outward, the trail of prints leading deeper into the woods. But the quiet had shifted, felt less like the absence of sound and more like a presence listening. I recorded a short audio log, keeping my voice level. I explained what I had observed, avoiding anything interpretive. Factual descriptions only: soil displacement, footprint morphology, absent thermal signatures. When I finished, I clipped the recorder back to my vest and took a slow lap around the mound again, searching for any new disturbances. At the far side of the clearing, almost hidden behind a cluster of deadfall, I found something I should have noticed sooner. A tree, an old Douglas fir, leaned at a sharp angle, its trunk bowed outward in a way no windstorm would cause. The bend wasn't from above. It curved outward from the bottom, as though something had pressed against the roots from below and pushed the entire trunk outward in one smooth, controlled motion. No splintering, no break, just a gradual flex of decades-hardened wood. Trees don't do that, not even with seismic activity. Wood fractures before it bends like rubber. I stepped closer, ducking under low branches, and noticed a second thing. A thin line of disturbed soil snaking away from the tree, like a shallow burrow trail, but the dirt was pushed upward in a tight, narrow ridge, not dug. More like a vein rising to the surface. It ran for about 6 feet before sinking back underground, disappearing just before reaching the mound's base. I crouched beside it, running my gloved fingertips along the ridge. The soil was firm, almost packed from below, and again warm. My gut twisted with a sensation I hadn't felt in years. An instinctual awareness that something was not just physically present but attentive. A rustle behind me made me whip around. My hand went to the sidearm I never thought I'd have cause to draw in all my years on field investigations. A single crow had landed on a low branch, feathers puffed, head tilted. Birds return when danger passes. They don't show up in the middle of it. But this one wasn't acting like a normal crow. It stared directly at me, unblinking. No head bob, no shifting weight. Just a fixed, black-eyed stare that made the hair on my arms bristle. I took a single step back, keeping my breathing even. The crow didn't move, didn't even blink. Then the soil beneath the mound hissed. Not like shifting dirt, more like air being squeezed through narrow channels. A sound with intention behind it. I backed away slowly, step by step, until my boots met the base of a fallen log. My mind raced through the database of phenomena I'd studied, cataloged, written reports about. Nothing matched this combination of living environment responsiveness, thermal suppression, structural deformation, and silent movement beneath compacted soil. It wasn't seismic, it wasn't biological, and it sure as hell wasn't atmospheric. My radio crackled suddenly, nearly making me jump. The signal was weak and warped, like someone was speaking underwater. I lifted it cautiously. "Cole, report." The voice was Hale's, but distorted. "We have incoming, outbound, hiker. Conflicting data. Need your confirm." The transmission cut off mid-syllable. I tried responding. "This is Cole at 19A. I need a relay check. Signals unstable." Static answered me, high-pitched, almost tonal. My thumb hovered over the transmit button before I lowered the radio. Something wasn't interfering with the signal. Something was filtering it. I turned, scanning the tree line, and my eyes caught movement. Not fast, not sudden, just subtle enough to feel accidental. A figure, standing between two firs about 40 yards away. Human height, human posture, but too still, too centered. At first I thought it might be the hiker director Hale had mentioned, but even from this distance something was off. The arms hung too close to the sides. The head didn't tilt. No shifting feet. No natural sway of balance. I called out, projecting authority. "This is a restricted area. Identify yourself." The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the sound. I took one step toward it, then another, watching for any sign of recognition or intent. My boots crunched softly in the underbrush. The figure stayed perfectly still, but as I closed the distance to 30 yards, I realized the truth that made my chest tighten. It wasn't facing me. Its body was oriented toward me, yes, but the head, the angle of the shoulders, the alignment of the feet, they were all slightly off, rotated in ways that didn't agree with each other. Like the posture had been assembled piece by someone who'd only seen a human silhouette from far away. I stopped walking. The crow behind me gave a single metallic-sounding click, a noise no bird should make. The figure shifted, not a step, not a movement driven by muscles, more like a vertical slide, as if the entire body glided an inch upward before settling back to the ground. A lift, not a step. My breath froze. Beneath the mound, soil hissed again, longer this time, and the earth bulged a fraction of an inch. Between the mound and the figure in the trees, something unspoken connected the two, and I realized with chilling clarity that I was standing directly between them, and neither one was done moving. The moment I realized I was standing between the mound and the figure, something primal inside me, the part of the brain older than language, older than rational thought, told me not to move, not forward, not backward. Stillness felt like the only lifeline in a forest that had stopped behaving like a forest. But stillness wasn't going to save me for long. The figure stood 30 yards away, its posture subtly wrong, its balance not quite earned. It didn't breathe the way a person breathes. There was no expansion under the ribs, no tightening of shoulders. Just a statue made of flesh or something trying hard to look like flesh. The slight glide upward I'd seen wasn't a trick of light. The ground itself had helped move it. Behind me, the mound gave another faint bulge, like an animal shifting beneath a blanket. The soil moved slow, controlled, deliberate. Something beneath was rising, testing the tension of the earth like a diver pushing upward from the bottom of a lake. I forced myself to inhale, quiet, measured. My hand hovered near my holster but didn't touch it. Drawing a firearm in a situation like this, when I didn't understand the threat, risked escalating something that might otherwise remain observational. That's the first rule of Field Division 3. Don't introduce variables unless you're prepared to manage every consequence. But the ground under that rule felt very far away now. The figure slid again, not forward, not back, upward, a half-inch rise. Then it lowered, as if the forest floor were quietly shifting beneath its feet to test how much weight it carried. It wasn't walking, it was being carried. My mouth went dry. I tried speaking because silence seemed worse. "I can assist you," I said, projecting confidence I didn't feel. "If you're hurt or disoriented, I can help. Just stay where you are." The figure didn't respond. Not with voice, not with movement. Behind me, the crow clicked again. A metallic tap like a pebble hitting steel. I resisted the urge to turn. Predators watch for where you look. Besides, the crow's presence felt too intentional to treat like wildlife. My radio crackled. A burst of static like distant breathing filtered through. Then Hale's voice, faint, unstable. "Cole, hold position. Do not repeat, not engage. Incoming team, 8 minutes out." 8 minutes. In this forest, 8 minutes felt like a full geological era. "Copy," I whispered, though I doubted anyone heard it. The figure shifted again, but this time, something changed subtly. Its left hand twitched, not moving outward, just flexing inward, the fingers curling as if testing how they worked. The skin didn't fold naturally. It creased in wrong places, as if stretched too thin or pressed down at inconsistent pressures. Then, finally, it turned its head. The rotation wasn't smooth. The neck stiffened, paused, then jerked a few degrees at a time. No living person moved like that. It reminded me of long exposure footage, something that jumped positions rather than transitioning through them. When the head finally settled facing me, I felt the weight of its attention without needing to see the eyes. Something inside me coiled with instinctive revulsion, not fear, recognition. The same sense you get when you realize a shadow in your peripheral vision isn't a shadow at all. The forest floor beneath my boots tightened. I felt it. Not a tremor but a gathering. A subtle drawing inward as if the ground were pulling its focus toward me. Pressure shivered through the soil, traveling from the mound toward the figure in a narrow band beneath my feet. Connection. A channel. I stepped sideways, fast but quiet. The pressure followed. That confirmed it. I wasn't caught between two things. I was standing on something's spine. I backed away, careful to keep my movements controlled. The figure's head tracked my motion, jerking 1 degree at a time. Its mouth opened. Not wide, not dramatically, just enough to part the lips. There were no teeth, just darkness. A sound leaked out. Not a voice, not a breath. Faint, wet scrape, like soil shifting against something rigid. The mound behind me pulsed. The crow hopped once on its branch, feathers shivering as though reacting to a tremor none of my instruments could register. Then it made that same unnatural metallic click. this time louder, sharper. The figure froze instantly, as if responding to a command. I wasn't breathing anymore. My chest locked. The crow clicked a second time. The figure jerked backward 3 inches, lifted again by the ground. Then it rotated. Not the head this time, the entire torso swiveling in a full 40-degree arc without moving its feet. Testing range of motion, aligning with something unseen, something underground. And the moment that thought crystallized in my mind, the forest floor surged. Not violently, not like an earthquake, more like a deep, slow push, an upward swell that traveled from beneath the mound toward me, beneath the leaf litter, beneath roots older than the country. The ground wanted me closer to the figure. That was the moment I broke protocol. I stepped back fast, then faster, retreating away from both the mound and the strange figure. But the ground didn't settle. It followed, rising in small, soft, controlled shifts like a pulse pushing forward beneath the soil. I reached a tree and pressed my back against it, grounding myself in something solid. The tree didn't move. Maybe that was a good sign. Maybe whatever was beneath the soil wasn't strong enough to lift through a deep root system. The figure glided forward in response to my retreat. Not walking, just carried, as though the earth beneath it were a conveyor moving on command. It covered 5 feet in a silent, unnatural slide. I raised my hand. "Stop," I said. "Stay where you are." It didn't stop. The ground carried it another 2 feet. My throat tightened. I knew then with absolute clarity that whoever the hiker was, the one forester said they detained, the prints emerging from the mound belonged to them. And whatever walked in front of me wasn't the hiker. It was the result of the hiker. The radio crackled again. This time a voice, clearer, urgent. "Cole, get to the access point. Now, do not remain stationary. Repeat, do not remain." The message cut off, but the intent was enough. Staying still wasn't safety. Staying still was making me easier to map. I took a slow breath, braced myself, and stepped away from the tree. The ground reacted instantly. A ripple beneath the soil rushing toward me like something delighted I'd chosen to move again. I didn't wait for it to reach me. I ran. The figure glided after me, carried by the living ground. The mound behind us hissed sharply, like something preparing to surface. And the forest, for the first time in my life, stopped watching. It began to follow. I didn't run recklessly. Adrenaline wanted me to sprint blind, but training kept my pace controlled, measured, silent as a man running for his life can be. The forest floor shifted beneath me in pulses, small, soft rises that caught at the edges of my soles, trying to predict where my weight would land next. Whatever intelligence controlled the soil wasn't fast enough to anticipate sudden changes in stride, but it was learning. Behind me, something glided through the trees, branches brushing softly, not breaking, not cracking. The figure didn't move like someone chasing. It moved like someone being delivered. I cut left around a fallen cedar, boots barely touching the ground, and felt the soil swell where my foot had been half a second earlier. Not random, a reaction. It missed only because I was moving too fast. That wouldn't last. My radio hissed, then a burst of a voice. "Cole? Status? Coordinates?" I didn't answer. I couldn't risk anything that slowed my stride. I kept my eyes ahead, scanning for familiar landmarks, but the terrain looked wrong. Not unrecognizable, just subtly warped, as though the forest had breathed out and shifted its ribs. Trees curved inward at slight angles, roots exposed where they shouldn't be, the slope gentler in places and steeper in others. The forest was rearranging itself, not drastically, but enough to slow me, funnel me. Ahead, a narrow gap between 2 fir trunks looked like a perfect exit route. Then the ground in front of it rose in a smooth, deliberate swell, just enough to discourage me, just enough to suggest that whoever was beneath the dirt didn't want me going that way. I veered right, cutting through brush that scraped my arms and caught my pack. My breath started to hitch, not from exertion but from the sickening awareness that the forest terrain wasn't static anymore. Every few steps, the soil tried to rise under my feet. Small, testing motions at first. then more assertive ones, tiny mounds forming a fraction of a second too late to grab my boots but learning with each attempt. It was mapping my movement patterns. A branch snapped to my left. Not natural breakage, but a clean, precise snap as if something had rotated through it without slowing. I didn't look back, but I felt the air shift, felt the unnatural quiet carried with the figure gliding behind me, felt the weight of its attention even without turning. The forest didn't want distance between us. My footing slipped suddenly, soil bulging beneath my heel. I threw my weight forward, catching myself on a low branch, and stumbled into a shallow, moss-lined gully. The air smelled thick with wet iron, the same scent that clung to the footprints near the mound. It grew stronger as I descended, like the smell had weight and density. No, not smell. Something particulate, mineral, metallic. Soil chemistry was changing. I scrambled up the opposite side of the gully, boots sliding on loose needles. Behind me, something soft thudded into the gully floor. A gentle, cushioned impact, as though someone had stepped onto a mattress of moss without bending their knees. The figure delivered again, gliding exactly where I had been seconds earlier. It didn't have to chase me. The ground was doing that for it. I reached a flat stretch of forest floor and pushed hard, lungs burning as I tried to outpace whatever system was analyzing my movement. The soil reacted, small ripples moving ahead of me now, not behind. It was predicting. I changed direction abruptly, hard right turn, leaping over a rotting stump. The ground missed again, rising in the spot I would have stepped if I'd run straight. Collapsed a moment later, settling like disappointed breath. This thing learned fast, but not instantly. That was the only reason I was still alive. The crow reappeared overhead, black wings cutting low across my path. It didn't caw. It didn't circle. It simply flew parallel to me with eerie precision, matching my pace. And then, God! Its beak opened and that same metallic click pierced the air. The forest reacted instantly. The soil ahead of me surged. Not a small bulge this time, but a long, rising line like a buried spine. A barrier being erected in real time. I skidded to a stop. My boots dug trenches. The ground rose higher 3 feet, then forming a long, curved wall of compacted earth. It wasn't blocking my path by accident. It was funneling me. I spun around, ready to run the opposite direction. The figure stood 20 feet away, close enough that I could finally see its face in full. It wasn't a face anymore. The features were arranged correctly. Eyes, nose, mouth. But the proportions didn't hold. The left side sagged as if the musculature had no tension. The right cheek bulged unnaturally, as if packed with wet soil. The lips were pulled too taut, revealing a dark interior with no teeth, no tongue, no moisture, just darkness. Its eyes were wrong, wide, unblinking, not glassy but reflective, reflecting too much light, reflecting me, distorted, as though the corneas were polished stone. I took one slow step backward. The figure responded with a glide forward, no bending joints, no shifting weight. Not chasing, answering. A movement beneath my left boot caught my attention. Soil gathering, swelling, shaping itself into a small mound. Preparing to rise beneath me, instinct took over. I stamped down hard, disrupting the swell, forcing the soil flat. A ripple ran beneath it, annoyed. My radio blared suddenly, louder than before. Cole, if you can hear. Exit is north-northeast. Bearing 70. Move now. Do not engage. Repeat. Move now. Northeast. That meant turning my back fully on the figure. I didn't want to do that, but protocol and survival left no choice. I pivoted sharply, driving my foot into the forest floor before it could shift under me, and sprinted northeast. The ground protested, bulges rising in frantic, erratic pulses to catch me. The crow screeched its metallic click again, and the figure behind me glided forward at impossible speed, lifted by the very terrain I was trying to outrun. The forest began closing around me, branches lowering, the canopy thickening, trunks leaning inward as if the whole environment were folding, guiding, shepherding. The ground rose directly ahead 6 inches, then 8, then a full foot. I leapt over it, landing hard on the far side, knees buckling. Pain shot up my leg but held. I pushed off again, breathing sharp, fast, desperate. The soil swelled behind me, angry now. Yes, that was the only word for it. Angry. Through the shifting trees, I saw a break in the forest. Light through the canopy. The access zone. 100 yards out. 70. 50. The ground surged violently beneath me. An eruption of earth that caught my right boot mid-stride. I stumbled, pitched forward, hit the ground hard. My palms burned as dirt embedded in my skin. The world tilted, spinning. The soil beneath my body pulsed once, like a heartbeat, preparing to pull me down or push me up. Branches cracked behind me. Something glided closer. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain, and ran with everything left in me. The trees thinned. The light widened. The forest floor stopped moving. For 10 seconds, the world held perfectly still. Then, behind me, something broke the surface of the mound. And even from the access gate, even with distance and sun and solid ground beneath my feet, the sound of that emergence followed me like a promise. Not a roar, not a scream, a breath, a long, slow, rising breath, as if something that had been underground for a very, very long time was finally waking up. I didn't stop running until my hand hit the cold metal of the access gate. I grabbed the bars like they were the only solid things left in the world and hauled myself through the narrow service gap rangers use during emergencies. Once I was on the other side, on compacted gravel instead of soil that learned and breathed, I let myself turn around. The treeline swayed gently in the morning breeze. Just trees, just branches, just shadows. But the forest didn't look like a forest anymore. It looked like it was holding its posture the way a person holds still when they don't want you to know they've been moving. The breath from the mound, God, I can still feel it, seemed to reverberate through the trunks. A bass note too low to be heard but easy to feel, like pressure behind the ears. The kind that comes right before altitude sickness, except cleaner, more focused. Intentional. Then the sound stopped, cut clean, and the stillness afterward was worse. My radio vibrated with another burst of static, but this time the channel opened properly. Cole, respond. Hale said, voice sharp, contained. What's your position? I pressed the transmit button. I'm outside the restricted boundary. Something in the soil. Stay put. Hale cut in. Team is 30 seconds out. I could hear engines in the distance. Not sirens, black SUVs, the kind that carry people like us. I backed farther from the treeline, putting a solid 100 feet of gravel between myself and the soil that had tried to anticipate every one of my steps. My hands shook as the adrenaline wore off, leaving a hollow cold behind it. A rustle echoed from the forest, faint but deliberate. Not wind, not animal movement, more like weight shifting beneath roots. I stared hard, staying still, forcing my breathing to slow. If anything crossed the boundary, I'd see it. I'd log its behavior, to call it in. But the forest didn't send the thing after me. It just watched. 2 black vehicles rounded the bend at speed, crunching gravel, engines aggressive enough to make the treeline shiver. The first SUV braked to a stop 10 feet from me. The second blocked the road behind it. 4 agents stepped out, 2 I recognized, 2 I didn't. All wore protective vests and kept their hands close to their equipment. Hale stepped out last. He didn't approach me at first. He stared past me at the forest. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the tendons standing out along his neck. Then he turned to me, eyes scanning for injuries. You're pale, he said. Short, clipped. Did the ground contact you? In several locations, I said. No breakthrough, but it learned my movement patterns. Hale exhaled once, slow. We expected development, but not to this extent. This extent. That choice of words hit me harder than the ground rising under my boots. How much do you already know? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he signaled the others. 1 agent retrieved a case from the back of the SUV. Black, reinforced, marked with orange hazard stripes I hadn't seen outside controlled labs. Another agent readied a handheld LiDAR device. Cole, Hale said. "Walk me through what happened. Summaries only." I swallowed hard. My throat felt raw. The mound rose from beneath. No displacement, no sinkhole physics. A barefoot print emerged on top, fresh, juvenile-sized. I followed the prints until they vanished. The soil moved under my boot, slow at first. In the clearing, a figure appeared, human-shaped but assembled wrong. It tracked me without stepping. The ground carried it. Hale nodded slowly, not surprised, not shaken, prepared. "You weren't supposed to encounter a derivative form alone," he said. "A derivative?" I stopped. "You knew this was happening." "Suspected," he corrected. "The sensors have been giving partial signals for months. Nothing conclusive, nothing actionable. But last night, the pressure signatures escalated." I stared at him. Escalated to what? He met my eyes without blinking. "To patterned emergence." Emergence. A word we never use unless we're talking about phenomena transitioning from localized anomalies into structured behaviors. The forest rustled again. Every agent turned toward the sound automatically, hands shifting toward weapons they hoped they wouldn't need. But nothing stepped out. Nothing glided. Nothing rose. Not yet. Hale motioned two of his agents forward. "Deploy the anchors." They jogged toward the boundary line with the reinforced case, knelt and opened it. Inside were 4 metallic units, triangular, heavy, with spike-like ends. They hammered each device into the ground just outside the treeline, one at each cardinal point. I'd only seen anchors deployed twice in my career. They don't physically restrain anything. They map energy fields. Specifically, they track distortions in ground pressure, electromagnetic anomalies, conductivity, and subsurface movement patterns. Anchors are only used when something is trying to move under us. When the 4th anchor activated, a faint hum vibrated through the air. The soil inside the forest shifted immediately in response. All 4 anchors lit up at once. Every device flashed red. Even Hale swore under his breath, something I'd never heard him do. "Cole," he said quietly, "you need to step farther back." I didn't argue. I moved until gravel crunched beneath me again. My pulse stayed high, but my mind had moved into procedural clarity. The fear was still there. It would be insane for it not to be, but training gave me something solid to hold on to. A tremor ran beneath the treeline, then another. Not random tremors, coordinated pulses. Movement at all quadrants, one agent reported, checking the LiDAR. Depth fluctuating. Top layer displacement rising in synchronized intervals. "Height?" Hale asked. 6 inches at peak, no 8-10, sir. It's still rising." The soil beneath the trees swelled, slowly, in a wide circular pattern, bigger than the mound I'd seen. The forest floor lifted like something massive beneath it was inhaling again. I stepped forward despite myself. "It's coordinating now. That wasn't happening before." Hale didn't look surprised. He didn't look scared. He looked resigned. "This is what we were trying to avoid," he said quietly. "What exactly are we dealing with?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Behind the treeline, the rising soil cracked open. Not explosively, but delicately, like a crust splitting to reveal softer layers beneath. The ground exhaled. Branches bowed inward. And for a moment I saw something. Not a creature. Not a person. A shape. A mass. Something shifting beneath the topsoil in layered patterns, like muscle contractions moving through Earth itself. Hale touched his earpiece. "Containment protocols are green. Prepare for visual." The soil bulged again, this time toward us. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. The figure that had chased me wasn't the threat. It was the test. Whatever was rising now was the real event. The soil rose in a slow, deliberate swell, and every instinct I had told me that none of us were standing far enough back. The anchors hummed louder, their red lights pulsing in uneven rhythms as if trying to keep pace with the movement underneath. The swell wasn't chaotic. It moved in a coordinated wave, concentric and rolling, like something was feeling along the underside of the forest floor the way a hand feels along a wall in the dark. One of the agents, Miller, A steady man I'd worked with before, tightened his grip on the lidar until his knuckles blanched. "Sir," he said quietly, "the depth signatures. I've never seen readings like this." "How deep?" Hale asked. Miller swallowed. "It's not deep. It's everywhere." The words hit me harder than if he'd said 50 feet down or 1,000. Everywhere meant the entire sublayer of the forest was moving. The ground lifted again, 2 feet this time. A clean arc soil didn't behave like that unless something beneath it was dense enough to carry the surface without breaking it. I stepped instinctively toward Hale. "If that mass is unified," I said, keeping my voice low, "we're standing on its periphery." "That's why we're not any closer," Hale replied. "Focus. Tell me exactly what moved when you were inside." "It mapped me," I said. "Not instantly. It learned. Every step I took, the soil adjusted faster, and it used the figure to test how close I'd let it get." Hale exhaled sharply, the closest he ever got to showing panic. "So we've crossed the behavioral threshold." One of the other agents, young, new, trying not to show fear, looked between us. "Behavioral threshold?" Hale ignored him. "Cole, did it ever try to fully surface near you? Or just the bulges?" "Just bulges," I said, "until I got close to the boundary. Then something under the mound, broke through." "And you didn't visually confirm?" "No." Hale nodded once, like that matched something he'd been expecting but hoping wouldn't be true. The ground pulsed again, but this pulse felt different, sharper, more exact. A directed push, not a wave. Every anchor lit bright red. Then all 4 devices shut off simultaneously. Not failed, not overloaded, terminated. "Oh hell," Miller whispered. The forest floor tensed, an entire landscape tightening its muscles. The mound at the center of the clearing split open in a clean, symmetrical line exactly 6 feet long. Soil parted like 2 sliding doors. No explosion, no flying debris. Just an elegant, controlled parting. And something inside shifted. Agents raised weapons. Hale held up a hand. "Nobody fires unless I give the order." The smell hit us next. The metallic scent I'd noticed earlier, but denser now, thicker. Not blood, not rot, more like concentrated minerals. Like the smell inside caves where groundwater carries iron deposits through rock. The mass beneath the soil moved again, unfolding in slow, smooth rotations. "Jesus," the young agent whispered. "Is that?" "It's not alive," Hale snapped. "Not in the biological sense." He was wrong. Or lying to himself. Something beneath that soil was absolutely alive, just not in a way we'd been trained to categorize. A shape rose from the split, broad, heavy, segmented like overlapping stone plates. Each segment pushed upward with silent precision. Dirt slid off the surfaces without clinging, the way water beads off oiled metal. I felt my stomach twist. The segments weren't stone. They were ribs. And they were working against the surface the way ribs expand under shallow breathing. Something beneath them stirred. A deeper mass. A larger one. Then the ribs settled again, sinking back just slightly, as if whatever was beneath were adjusting its posture. "Cole," Hale said, stepping closer to me without looking away from the emerging form. "Do you understand what this means?" "I'm trying," I said. He nodded once. "Good. Try harder." The ribs shifted again, this time rolling outward, flattening the soil around them in a wide radius. The forest floor moved with them, pliable, almost fluid. And then I saw movement off to my left. The figure, the derivative form, smooth, gliding, assembled wrong, stood just behind the nearest trunk outside the boundary line. It watched us from the shadows, its 2 reflective eyes catching the morning light in unnatural angles. "How did it get out?" Miller breathed. "It never left," I said softly. "It just stayed where the ground wanted it." The figure tilted its head, slow, sharp, unnatural, and something about the gesture made the forest respond. Branches shifted. Soil rose slightly beneath the ribs. Every component in this place, soil, trees, derivative form, was reacting to the same source. The presence beneath the ribs. The ground beneath the ribs convulsed once, a rippling wave moving outward from the center. Not violent, not explosive, communicative, like something enormous was clearing its throat. Hale stepped forward. "We need visual confirmation on the core structure," he said. "Cole, with me." My chest tightened. "That's a mistake. It's my mistake to make." He didn't get 2 steps before the soil in front of him rose in a tight, narrow ridge, blocking his path. A message, a boundary, a warning. Hale froze. The ridge settled back down slowly, almost politely. "Sir," I said, barely audible. "It's aware of you. It's aware of all of us." The ribs shifted again, slightly lifting, revealing something beneath them. Not fully, not enough to identify, just a hint, something pale, something smooth, something huge. The young agent stumbled backward. "I don't think we're supposed to see this." He was right. Something told me, without sound, without touch, that this wasn't an emergence. It was a question. The figure in the trees glided a few inches forward, carried by the soil. His posture sharpened. It watched us not as prey, not as threats, but as variables in an experiment. The ribs lifted a little more, and beneath them, I finally saw movement. Slow, rhythmic contractions rippling through pale mass, like something enormous breathing just under the surface. Hale's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not surfacing. It's sampling. Sampling us. Sampling our reactions, our distance, our threat level, our vocalizations, our posture. All the things the derivative form had been testing on me alone inside the forest." This was the second phase. My radio crackled suddenly. Only one sound, faint, fragile. A child's voice, not a recording, not interference. A whisper, "Help me." Everything inside me locked. The voice came from under the ribs, and the figure in the trees mimicked the whisper. Mouth opening in perfect sync, darkness inside shifting as though shaping the same single word. "Help." My blood ran ice cold. Hale slowly raised one hand toward his team. "Do not respond," he said, voice barely audible. "No matter what you hear, do not." The ground beneath the ribs inhaled, and the whole forest leaned forward to listen. The forest leaned forward the way a crowd leans before a verdict. Branches angled subtly inward, needles whispering in a breathless hush. Even the air felt taut, compressed by something expectant pressing in from all sides. The ribs, not bone, not mineral, but something large and impossibly smooth, hovered just inches above the soil, each pale segment trembling with controlled tension. Beneath them, the faintest pressure wave rolled outward, not enough to move dirt, but enough to vibrate through the gravel under my boots. Hale lifted his hand again, palm aimed back toward us, commanding stillness without needing words. No one disobeyed. Even the young agent who'd nearly stepped back earlier now looked carved from stone, eyes wide, throat working in panicked swallows. The whisper came again. "Help me." This time, the voice wasn't coming from under the ribs. Came from the trees behind us. A small voice, a child, weak and breaking and terrified. The young agent spun, raising his weapon. Miller hissed, "Don't turn your back to it." But he'd already done it. A shadow moved between 2 trunks. Something small, human-shaped, staggering unsteadily. A child-sized silhouette, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Bare feet, thin arms, uneven steps. The missing hiker's size. The voice from under the ribs whispered again. So did the figure in the trees. So did the child shape behind us. All 3 whispered the same sound at the same moment, the same pitch, the same breath. "Help." My stomach dropped. Perfect synchronization. Not echoes, mirrors. This wasn't communication. It was replication. Hale spoke through clenched teeth. "Everyone hold your positions. Do not respond. Do not engage." But the child shape behind us took another stumbling step forward, and the young agent broke. He moved instinctively, not running, not aggressive, just a small, desperate step toward what he thought was a person who needed him. "No," Hale snapped, but too late. The forest floor reacted instantly. Soil surged beneath the young agent's boots, soft, deceptive. rising to greet the soles of his shoes like a cushion rushing upward. He sank half an inch, then a full inch. The ground held him gently, almost tenderly. "Sir, something's under," he choked, trying to pull his foot free. The soil gripped. The ribs shifted. The child shape in the trees tilted its head in a way no vertebrate spine could allow. Hale barked, "Get back! Now!" The agent yanked upward with all his strength. His boot came free but not clean. Something slick clung to it, stretching like thin strings of clay before snapping back into the earth. His breath hitched. He stumbled backward toward us. The child-shaped silhouette vanished into the trees with a single smooth backward slide, as if pulled by an invisible winch. The soil where it had stood pulsed once. Then the ribs rose another 6 inches. This time, enough surface underneath became visible for every one of us to see more clearly. Pale mass, smooth, undulating, like the top of an enormous organism pressing gently upward. Not a creature breaching, a creature listening. "Cole," Hale said without taking his eyes off the emerging structure. "The vocal mimicry started when you entered the zone, correct?" "Yes." "And the first voice it used?" "The hiker," I said quietly. "The one who came out wrong." The ribs shifted again, peeling back another inch like petals opening. A faint vibration rippled outward. The anchors, offline, powerless, shivered on their metal frames as if something inside the forest were magnetizing the very soil. Miller checked the LiDAR again and cursed under his breath. "Sir, I'm reading structure density under the core. It's not amorphous. It has architecture." "Architecture?" Hale asked. "Yes," Miller said. "Patterns, columns, jointed segments." My breath froze. Jointed segments. The derivative form that followed me didn't walk. It was carried, lifted, moved on something beneath the surface that acted like articulated limbs. The pale mass beneath the ribs pulsed. Then, without warning, something thin and almost invisible broke the surface to the left of the mound. A filament of soil lifted as if pinched upward by a thread. Another filament rose on the right side. Another 3 behind the ribs. Lines of displaced soil, so faint they barely registered visually, extended outward from the mound like spokes of a wheel. "Sir, lateral extension," Miller whispered. "It's probing outward, looking for boundaries. For us." Hale stepped forward again. The ground did not block him this time. That scared me more than anything else. When the entity allows proximity, it's not permission. It's curiosity. Hale raised his voice slightly. "We're not here to harm you." Instantly, the soil beneath his left boot trembled. Subtle but unmistakable. Not angry, not aggressive. Responsive. It heard him. The whisper came again. But this time only from under the ribs. "Help!" But the voice shifted halfway through the word. Breaking, glitching, sliding out of the young tone and into another. An adult. A man. Familiar. My knees nearly buckled when I placed it. The detained hiker. The one ranger forester had told me couldn't close his jaw properly. The one who whispered the same phrase over and over. Pushed the dirt up to meet me. No, that wasn't what he whispered. That was what Ranger Forrester said he whispered. The hiker actually whispered, "Help me." So did the figure. So did the child shape. So did the thing beneath the ribs. A cluster of mimicked voices, all synced to the same pulse. "Cole," Hale said, eyes still locked on the ribs. "Tell me everything the hiker told Forrester. Every word." I forced my voice steady. "He said the ground pushed the dirt up to meet him." Hale's jaw tightened. "Forrester said that." "Yes." "What did the actual hiker say?" I swallowed hard. "He said, 'Help me,' over and over, whispering, like his jaw wasn't working right." Hale nodded grimly. "That's consistent." The ribs expanded outward suddenly. The mass beneath rose 3 full inches in one smooth, coordinated motion. The entire forest floor leaned with it. Then something new happened. A sound, not a whisper, not a breath, not mimicry, a scrape. 2 surfaces sliding, then a second scrape, then a third. Segments, jointed. Something beneath the earth was unfolding its structure. The pale mass beneath the ribs moved again. And, God help me, a single pale shape pushed closer to the opening. Not enough to show its full form. Just enough for its surface to catch the daylight so we could see texture. Not flesh, not bone. Something in between. Something that shouldn't exist under a forest floor. Something that had been waiting and learning, and now, finally, wanted us to answer back. The pale shape paused just beneath the split in the soil, as if gauging the air above it. The ribs hovered over the opening like a shield, not fully lifting, not lowering either. Everything in the clearing felt suspended. Every agent held their breath. The forest held its posture. Even the sunlight filtering through the canopy seemed to dim, like the trees were narrowing their branches to reduce glare. Hale didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the opening. Not with fascination, not with terror, with recognition, as though whatever was surfacing was something he'd spent years preparing himself to confront. "Cole," he murmured, "if it advances, you step back. Do not let the soil under you tighten. It will follow," I whispered. "That's why you step back slowly." The ribs shifted again, 3 inches upward this time, peeling the opening wider. The pale structure beneath it expanded gently, a breathing motion. Not air exchange, a mechanical rhythm, a wave traveling through the mass like signal propagation. It wasn't trying to escape. It was testing exposure. The forest around us rustled. Not wind, not animals. A unified motion. Hundreds of saplings and underbrush bending inward at the same moment, like a ripple through a crowd. The derivative figure near the trees stepped forward too, gliding with the soil's subtle push. Everything connected to what lay beneath the ribs was synchronizing. A low vibration rolled under our feet, longer than the pulses before, deeper, stretching out like a resonance across hollow ground. My chest tightened as it passed through me. Not dangerous, just aware. The pale shape shifted again and the ribs opened wider, enough for a sliver of the mass beneath to rise fully into view. The surface was smooth, pliant, the faintest gray-blue tone like weathered stone touched by moonlight. The texture was wrong. It moved like a muscle but gleamed like polished mineral. Then something on the mass changed. A crease formed, then another. Tiny adjustments rippled across the exposed surface, like the thing was trying to model a shape. Not random spasms, not instinct, attempted imitation of what I didn't have to ask. It became clear a moment later. The pale surface pressed upward again and folded, forming a shallow indentation, a suggestion of a human cheek. The smoothness bulged on the opposite side, like a forming jawline. Then the faintest impression of an orbit, a socket, the beginnings of a face it had copied from one of us. The same way the derivative form had copied posture, the same way the child shape had copied voice. This thing wasn't trying to show us itself. It was trying to show us a version of us. Hale breathed out, barely audible. "It's mapping contact points." The young agent, trembling, whispered, "It's trying to make a person?" "No," Hale said softly. "It's trying to understand one." The pale form twitched again and the ribs spread wider, tension creaking through each plate like slow-moving machinery. A larger section surfaced, smooth contours shifting, rearranging, flowing into shape after shape as though testing which configuration matched our silhouettes. A chin formed, then an ear, then a hollow where a nose should be, then, wrongly, another ear forming at the wrong angle before sinking back into the mass as though the creature realized it was incorrect. It wasn't guessing. It was teaching itself. "Sir," Miller whispered, voice shaking. "If this thing is that adaptive—" "It is," Hale said. "Then why hasn't it fully surfaced?" Hale looked at him with an expression I'd never seen on the man before. "Because it's waiting for permission." My skin went cold. The pale mass shivered under the ribs as though reacting to the word itself. A ripple traveled across its surface, slow and deliberate. The child voice whispered again, this time from multiple directions. From under the ribs, from the trees, from deeper in the woods, all overlapping. "Help me." But now the tone was shifting, less desperate, more curious. A test of emotional inflection. The derivative form stepped from the trees fully now, its posture stiff, its head tilted too far to one side. It stopped at the boundary line as though hitting an invisible wall. The soil beneath it tightened. The forest leaned. The mass beneath the ribs pulsed once more. "Cole," Hale said quietly, "do not speak. Do not answer. Do not step forward." I didn't move, but the creature beneath the ribs did. A groove formed in its surface, vertical, thin, like a mouth trying to shape words. The groove widened, but not naturally. The edges split slightly as though it was imitating how a human mouth opens without understanding the underlying anatomy. The voice came again, not whispered, formed, trying to replicate the mechanics of speech by mimicking airflow through non-existent lungs. "Help me." The sound struggled out, wet, hollow, but unmistakably not recorded. It was trying to talk, and every instinct in my body screamed that letting it finish would be a catastrophic mistake. Hale gestured sharply. "Now, pull back. Slow retreat." We stepped backward in unison, each movement measured, controlled. The soil under my boots remained still, watching, waiting. The pale mass pressed closer to the opening. The ribs rose higher. The forest leaned farther in, branches dipping so low they brushed the tops of the anchors. And then, a tremor, a deep, resonant vibration shook the entire clearing, rippling through the soil, the trees, through us. Not an attack, a realization. The creature beneath the soil suddenly froze. The partial face collapsed back into smoothness. The ribs sealed downward, fast. The entire opening snapped shut with a sound like two slabs of earth clapping together. Soil flowed back into place instantly, flattening perfectly as though the ground had never moved at all. The derivative form in the trees retracted, sliding backward into the foliage like a puppet being pulled off stage. The forest stilled. The air cleared. The smell vanished. The vibration stopped. Everything went completely, impossibly quiet. Hale exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. "It's retreating." Miller wiped sweat from his forehead. "Why? What made it stop?" Hale shook his head. "It didn't stop. It paused." The young agent's voice cracked. "For how long?" Hale stared at the tree-lean with a look that chilled me more than anything the creature had done. "Until the next contact event." "Next?" I whispered. "We're going back?" "No," Hale said softly. "We're not." He looked at the sealed ground, the perfectly flat soil, the forest pretending nothing had happened. "But someone will." A cold realization settled in my gut as Hale continued. "And when that happens, it won't be testing anymore." I didn't speak. None of us did. Because the worst part wasn't the thought of what lay beneath that soil. The worst part was knowing. It now had everything it needed. It knew our voices. It knew our shapes. It knew our movement patterns. It knew what fear looked like in our posture. And given time, it would know how to surface, looking like one of us. The forest breathed one last time behind us, and then fell perfectly, horrifyingly still. Nothing ended that day. It only began looking up.